I will provide a short presentation describing the purpose of this public meeting and share a brief summary of specific changes to Global's air emission license being proposed in this licensing action and how this meeting will be organized and run. Emphasis on short presentation. After the presentation, you, the public, will be provided the opportunity to comment on the draft license modification. And we will provide instructions at that time on how to do so within this virtual meeting format. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. This public meeting is one piece of the air emission license revision process. The purpose of the meeting is to receive comments from the public on the department's proposed draft air emission license amendment for global companies. This presentation is not about, and this meeting is not about, changes and topics beyond the scope of the current draft amendment, and it is not about other facilities in South Portland or elsewhere in Maine. In December 2019, a consent decree between Global and EPA was finalized, in which Global agreed to address certain things in their air emission license, which is issued by the state of Maine. The application submitted by Global to the Maine DEP is to add requirements to their license as mandated by the consent decree. In addition to the requirements of the consent decree, this draft amendment addresses a lower facility-wide emission limit imposed by Maine DEP and the testing, record-keeping, and reporting required of Global to demonstrate that they are in compliance with that lower limit. This draft also makes some housekeeping changes to visible emission limits and fuel sulfur content limits based on recent revisions to the underlying rules. At this time, we wish to solicit comments from the public on the draft license amendment. This meeting is for the department to gather information and hear from the public. We want to hear from you, and we will be focused on capturing your comments and input for the record. In the notices that went out about the meeting, we asked participants to pre-register if they wish to provide verbal comments at this meeting. To allow everyone who wishes to speak the opportunity to be heard, and based on the number of responses received, we will be allocating 5 minutes per speaker. You don't have to take your whole 5 minutes, but you have 5 minutes. Please be respectful of your fellow commenters and adhere to this time limit. If necessary, we will give you a warning if you get close to the end of your 5 minutes. After everyone who pre-registered has had an opportunity to speak, we will offer the opportunity for other speakers as time allows. At that time, please indicate you wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in Zoom. As time allows, we will also open the floor to those participating by phone only. Again, a reminder that this meeting is being recorded, and comments provided to the department through this public meeting are considered part of the public record. There are 8 members of the public who have registered to speak at this public meeting. I will go through, and as your name is announced, that would be the opportunity to unmute yourself. And please begin your comments by stating your name and where you're from. Also, if you are speaking on behalf of an organization or a group, please identify that as well. And we will start with, and this I believe is in order of, no particular order, I think it's as the people's names were added to our list. So the first speaker that we have on our list is Andrew Fursh. Andrew, if you are available and there, please unmute yourself and begin. Well, this is not very fruitful at this time. We can go to the next name on the list. I'm searching through those I have in the list of attendees. I don't recognize the name, or I don't see the name anywhere. Next name I have on the list is Chelsea Bayan, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
It was close. It's Chelsea Bian.
Oh, thank you.
Hi. I'm feeling a little bit unprepared because I thought we were going to get a little bit more information first before the public comment period started, and I'm actually kind of disappointed that we aren't getting more because I feel like I have a lot of questions about the draft that I was hoping you were going to be able to answer tonight. But I'll just move forward. So I would like to say that I'm kind of mixed minds tonight, because on the one hand, I think that the DEP is showing its commitment through this draft to address this problem as a serious problem. I'm sorry, I should have said that I live in South Portland, and I live on Margaret Street, and I am speaking on behalf of myself, though I have been volunteering with Protect South Portland around the tank farms issue. I have 2 young children, and we smell the fumes at our home on top of Meeting House Hill very regularly, and I frequently am getting up in the middle of the night, going into their room and feeling like it smells like petroleum in their bedroom, and they are 3 and 5, and that leaves me very concerned. As you've probably heard me say before, I thought that I didn't know what this was until the news about the lawsuit broke. I called the city a couple of times, called the fire department a couple of times, had our boiler checked a couple of times, and couldn't figure it out, and then heard news of the lawsuit against Global. So I see this draft, and particularly the requirement that Global do conduct actual testing, as an important step forward. I think the thing that we have been calling for in all this is transparency and accountability, and this is a great step towards transparency. I hope that the DEP will listen to public comments about that testing, specifically asking that it be done more frequently, and also conducted by a third party, the results made public in a timely manner. And I'm very curious about, I didn't see it reflected clearly in the license of what happens if that testing gets done and we see that the results are similar to what Eastmount found, and the numbers put Global in excess of its license. What is the process then for, I don't know, reopening the license or dealing with potential violations? I would like to see that spelled out in the draft. That might be a little bit unusual, because I suspect that one answer to that comment would be that there are other places in the rules for those violations to be dealt with, but I don't think the rules have adequately been followed with these cases, or at least they've been left open to interpretation in ways that have failed this community. So I'm encouraged by the requirement that they are tested. On the other side of things, I feel very frustrated. I'm frustrated that Global has a synthetic miner status, and that despite repeated questions from citizens, from the Clean Air Advisory Committee, Commission, and we haven't gotten any answers about how that status is justified. In fact, we've been told on the one hand that the EPA throughput limits is a major reason why that status has been major justification for that status, but the EPA, in answering the CAC's questions, basically said, well, actually we're relying on the state's limitations and setting those throughput limits to keep global, within a minor emitter status. So it feels like we're getting the runaround, and I think that status, it just feels really dubious to me, given the history of the testing and the fact that the things haven't been very clear. And so I really would like the DEP to take the initiative to explain that to us and to require that Global provide some accounting for why they deserve that status and how the math works out. Without it, we can't have transparency or accountability.
Chelsea, just to let you know, you have about 30 seconds left.
I was just pausing to think if there's anything really important that I needed to say. I think I'll wrap up, and I do really appreciate all of the time the department has given to us on this. And I hope that, as I said, I'm up at mixed minds, but I hope that my inclination is right, that you are ready to take this seriously. Thank you. I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person on the list is Jamie Rue.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I live in Westbrook, and I thank you, Chelsea. That was good to hear, because sometimes it feels like my concerns or concerns of people in the state of Maine are kind of being suppressed in regards to the expansion of natural gas and unrefined petroleum from North America. And I think one thing that Chelsea touched on, well, I think there are two things that I really agreed with. One is that I think it would be very helpful if there could be a public question period, not just a public comment period, because we're kind of put in a position where we don't have a lot of information to work on, and we're trying to tell you that we feel like we're getting hoodwinked, bamboozled, and poisoned. So that's one. The second thing is an issue of accountability. Global partner companies can't be held accountable because they're literally the largest companies in the world, just a global conglomeration of them. Really, if the state of Maine and the DEP truly wants to hold responsible parties accountable, we need to start talking about private equity. In this situation now, the majority of natural resources and energy infrastructure in the state of Maine is controlled by one private equity firm, a Canadian private equity firm called Brookfield Asset Management. The overwhelming presence of Brookfield Asset Management in Maine is not apparent because, as a private equity firm, they work through shared ownership of privately owned companies. So people in Maine are likely more familiar with the subsidiaries of Brookfield, like Fraser Paper, Twin Rivers, Summit Natural Gas, Black Bear Hydro, Rumford Hydro, Great Lakes Hydro America, just to name a few of some subsidiaries in Maine. On top of that, Brookfield Asset Management has 450 billion assets globally, including controlling shares in Kinder Morgan, the largest holding company for North American oil and gas, and they have controlling shares in Enbridge, which controls the majority of pipeline infrastructure in North America. So we need to start talking about Brookfield Asset Management if we have any hope of being a democracy where we have a say in the policies of energy in the state of Maine. And what I think has already happened, unfortunately, is that the pipelines have been laid, the compressor stations projects have been passed, and they happen beyond the scope of the public purview. Just like what happened at these storage containers in South Portland, where for years they've been leaking. So I know you started this by saying that this is only about the storage containers in South Portland, but when we're talking about a company called Global Companies, it's not just about the storage containers in South Portland. It's about the Westbrook Express project in Westbrook, Maine, which is happening right now with the expansion of pipeline capacity and compressor station capacity for distribution of natural gas and bituminous sand throughout Maine. And the resulting emissions from the Federal Energy Reserve Commission report, they're predicted to be 233,000 tons of greenhouse gas or CO2 equivalent emissions being released annually. That is like 51,000 cars. The annual emissions of 51,000 cars being released into Westbrook. And this has not been reported on by any of the major newspapers in Maine. It is being active. This information is being suppressed, while at the same time, people in Maine are very aware of a transmission project to transmit hydroelectricity from the province of Quebec into the Massachusetts energy grid. We all know about that. And that's because two natural gas plants, yep, I got what, 30 seconds?
Let you know to wrap up. Yeah.
Got it. The reason we know about the corridor, why there is public sentiment opposed to it, is because two natural gas plants, Vistra Energy in Veazey, which is owned by Brookfield Asset Management, and Calpine Energy in Westbrook, created a PAC that provided the funding for the campaign that you see online against this corridor, as well as for the ballot initiative to overturn it. And the reason they did that is because in order for the Federal Energy Reserve Commission to approve natural gas expansion projects like the Westbrook Express project, there needs to be a proven need for that increase in energy. So any other energy into the Massachusetts energy grid is a threat to the expansion of natural gas, and especially hydroelectricity, because unlike solar or wind, it can generate electricity at a more consistent rate, just like natural gas. So we're being hoodwinked and bamboozled because we're not talking about our private equity overlords, and that is Brookfield Asset Management. Thank you for listening to my rant.
Thank you. Sean Mahoney, you're up, please.
It's okay to put sour cream in the rice, right? Oh, yeah. Okay. Time to eat.
Is Sean Mahoney on the call or on the meeting? Well, let's go to the next name then. Priscilla Scary.
She's there. She may need to unmute.
How do I?
We can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, I just got in and I'm not ready to give my statement yet. Could I do a little bit later?
Absolutely. We'll circle back around. Thank you. Next person then would be Grace Bukowski-Thal, please. If you would unmute yourself and state your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Grace. I live in the West End. So I also basically in the line of fire for the emissions from the global tanks and the Sprague tanks that are in South Portland. And so I've lived in the West End for about, I guess, 6 years now is when my family moved here. But I've been commuting from Wells to go to school in Waynflete since I was 7 years old. So I've spent most of my day in this community for most of my life, and my younger siblings have done the same. And so I really didn't think or notice that much about the emissions that are in our air until the lawsuit came out and the exposés. And then I started to realize that a lot of the smells that I was associating with the West End in summertime or springtime were actually something that was really dangerous. And when I first started hearing about this about a year and a half ago, I kind of was beating myself up about that for not really noticing that that was a problem. But then I realized that that wasn't really my job. I was a kid. And that's, something that now I'm an adult. And so I can actually speak up for myself and advocate when I wasn't able to before, and where a lot of children and younger people that are exposed to this and really have no say are not able to speak up and notice these things, because we assume that the grown-ups and people in the government and politics and the DEP and the EPA and sometimes even the people in the oil companies will do the right thing. And so I guess what I want to say in the comments that I want to make is that first and foremost, I hope that the DEP and the politicians and the people that's jobs are to look out for us will basically never trust these oil companies to do the right thing, because they're never going to. And so we need things like 24/7 surveillance of them, and then we need emissions eliminators. They like to market it as it being odors, but no, it's emissions. It's not odors. It's volatile compounds that are actively harming us. And there's also, I think, a call to people in the community and everyone else that basically Maine fresh air is kind of a lie. So I went to Bowdoin, and on move-in day, they would put in these signs that were like, step out of your car and breathe in that fresh Maine air. But that's a lie, because Maine, among other things, is a tailpipe of this nation. And we have big companies that are polluting our air, giving us cancerous compounds. And so I guess another thing that I'd like to say is this is not the case in all states. For instance, Maine allows 10 times more benzene, which is a cancer-causing compound, into the air than other states. And so we really just need DEP to listen to people and not companies like Global, because they're not going to work in our best interest. We shouldn't trust their assessments. They might install equipment to sense the air, but they might not monitor it. They might not even set it up. And so basically I want to make sure and convey that the people who can help us and whose job is to listen to us and not the oil companies, and give them the proper surveillance that they need to not poison us. That's pretty much what I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list of speakers is Bruce Taylor.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Taylor. I'm speaking for myself. I'm from the town of Sweden. I'm a pediatrician and an anesthesiologist. I think what's paramount is protecting the public's health and looking at the history in general, but specifically on global, ensuring the trust of the public, that the public indeed trust that their health is being protected. And I think the state of Maine must carefully evaluate Global and Global's request to be granted a license to release emissions such as hazardous air pollutants into the air we breathe. And I have several, and I'm very glad we're talking about transparency, because looking back, there's much that went under the bridge. And I hope that we'll have transparency and save a lot of time and money on everybody's account on FOIA requests. But looking at the draft, I have several concerns and questions. First of all, I would hope that indeed, since we're only talking about one facility, that fence line monitoring needs to be instituted wherever it abuts or is in close proximity to recreational areas, homes, schools, businesses, or daycare centers. Again, not being an attorney, looked through both Maine statutes and the Code for Federal Register and couldn't see what would prohibit the state of Maine from doing that. Also, I think admissions monitoring of all stacks, so to speak, or other sources of admissions, including structures, vents, pipes, for heated asphalt and number 6 oil. But also, I think along with this, there should be emissions monitoring, not calculations, but real emission monitoring done for non-heated, such as distillate, kerosene, and diesel, which brings up, I believe it's proposed in the license that determine, stack monitoring, complete air monitoring, speciation be done every 14 months. I think that's what's stated in the draft, and I think that's wholly inadequate. I realize that 24/7 monitoring is ideal. It's important, may not be practical, but I believe Massachusetts requires every 6 months. And I think in view of global's history of violations and release of hazardous air pollutants and VOCs into the air and their subsequent threat to the public's health, there needs to be very frequent and detailed real-world emissions data generated that reflects the changing conditions of the refinery process, both processes within the refinery and also how the environment, such as the seasonal, affects us, while still, as you put in your draft, representing maximum operation. And you're requiring at least every 14 months, and I suspect therefore it'll be every 14 months. And I'm a little confused on the overlap. It's probably doesn't make that much difference. You're requiring Global to report their results every 12 months, but yet they don't have to monitor every 14 months. And I don't think Throughput is a good monitor what's coming out, what's leaking, what's being fugitive admissions, and what's being released. Also, I was a little confused and concerned about emissions factors required, by the license. I know there's been a lot of debate in other meetings that I think that emissions factors must be reflective of actual physical conditions and not from some chart from a methodology that's not being used. And I'm really confused and worried on, I think, page 9, section on compliance demonstration, that Global, and thus its paid employed consultants will determine emission factors, if I read it correctly, and quote, shall estimate admissions. I think Global, looking at their admissions, was really the basis of this illegal activity that initiated the complaint in the first place. And the other thing that I'm confused about, looking at LD 1915, was just recently passed by the 129th, it directs the Maine DEP, not an outside partial party like industry, to evaluate emissions from above ground petroleum tanks. So on one hand, it appears to me, looking at compliance demonstration on page 9, the industry can do it, which I think is a major problem. And I think DEP needs to do it, or get an independent consultant who can do it. But on the other hand, LD 1915 directs DEP, and thus not an outside party, like industry, to evaluate emissions. So I think that's inconsistent. And granted, you said we're only talking about one facility, that's Global. But I think, as been discussed,
Bruce, you have about 30 seconds left.
Last November City Council meeting, again, the way I look at it, this is a health issue. I know there are many other things. When it comes down to it, I don't think people are complaining about tax bases. I haven't heard that. They are not complaining about other things. They're talking about health issues. That, the relatively small population of South Portland is going to make any epidemiologic analysis of outcome surveillance irrelevant or not statistically relevant. And I think we should look at data put out by true emissions put out by global and other organizations, because basically what you're only looking, the way the laws are written, the way DEP administrates them is it's divide and conquer. Look at one, oh, it's okay, look at another, and you have to look at the cumulative health of the
Bruce,
community.
can
I
you
think,
wrap
however,
up,
by
please?
using an EPA human exposure model, HEM3, the risk from exposure can be determined for South Portland. It's been done. David Flacco, I know, a licensed professional engineer who also lives in South Portland, as a resident and an environmental engineer, has already used this model for South Portland. I think it would behoove all of us involved to carefully consider this model and his analysis, or any analysis that comes out with it. And one last thing that confuses me, and I guess you can't, I really need to look at this myself. At first I thought they were discussing another consent decree, but is it true that in the original complaint for global, that basically VOC emissions
I'm sorry, Bruce.
from
John waited
asphalt
under
and
5
fuel oil
minutes.
number 6 were not looked at, and that was felt to be from by the EPA to be over 40 tons per year, because that would be a whole lot of extra VOCs, if that is true, a whole lot of extra VOCs and HAPs that have gone out since at least 2013, that I'm sure the that the EPA knew after the Eastman study. I think the DEP knew about it. So I really appreciate this chance to talk, and hopefully a healthy outcome will be the result of the effort of all the concerned parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Abby Huntoon.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm a South Portland resident, and excuse me. I'm a little disappointed too, as one of the earlier speakers said. I thought it was going to be more of a question and answer and comment thing. So would have been nice to have some of our concerns able to be addressed. Anyway, I understand that Global installed a carbon scrubber in their facility in Chelsea, Mass. In 2002. The scrubber apparently failed to work after a very short period of operation, and it was removed. I think Global is proposing a carbon scrubber system here, and I was going to ask if this was really the best system. I certainly hope that the Maine DEP will not allow Global to install equipment that is inadequate just to hoodwink the community into thinking they are doing something. I wish there was some way that we could have a little more transparency to keep in touch with the process. The public could keep in touch with the process of what Global is initiating and what they're proposing to install, to make sure that we really do get relief and we're not getting inferior equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back around. Andrew Fursh, if you're on the line, you may, and this is your opportunity to speak. And hearing no Andrew, Sean Mahoney, if you are on as part of this meeting, this is your opportunity to speak. Excellent. Well, then Priscilla Scary, it is back. Are you ready? And you're muted, ma'am.
Yes, I am ready. Thank you.
Thank you. It's all yours.
I'm Dr. Priscilla Scary, a naturopathic doctor that practices in South Portland and lives on the west end of Portland. As a doctor of naturopathic medicine who always focuses on the many causes of a person's illness and is educated to take into account environmental exposures as contributing factors, And having followed the unfolding of this licensing dilemma posed by the EPA, DEP, and Global since the revelation of the CD way back in the spring of last year, my major concern is for those mothers and fathers and elderly and possibly the immune compromised individuals who live in very close proximity to those tanks. They're the canaries in the coal mine for the rest of us. The Global Corporation has made a verbal desire to be a good neighbor. To truly be a good neighbor means that not only odor be dealt with, but exposure to these very harmful HAPs and VOCs. That has to be corrected, correctly monitored and correctly controlled. What became evident is that the technical information being asked for is not sufficient to determine if what's being emitted by these tanks is harmful. I applaud the DEP for getting clear that, or more clear, that the best way to determine emissions is to directly measure them. There have been questions raised about Global's stated as a minor status as a minor emitter, meaning emitting less than 29 tons per year. Rather than assume the emissions are based on a calculated formula developed by the oil corporations themselves, I think we need to really measure these emissions. In 2012 and 2013, the EPA determined that Global was exceeding their licensed VOC limit. Now we are learning through the excellent questions raised by the South Portland Clean Air Advisory Board and through the many city council meetings that other states like Massachusetts were asked to control not only odor, but VOCs, despite being a minor emitter. So we question, why can't Global that be asked of Global here? Global alluded to the possibility of cleaning up VOCs with the installation of their carbon scrubber. They are proposing, the carbon scrubber they were proposing. It would be wonderful to see the main DEP consult with the Mass DEP to find out, for example, why the carbon scrubber that Global installed in 2002 failed to work soon after it was installed, and what was done to correct it. So if we get a similar situation, that could take place here too. But be that as it may, the real and important question remains is, why is Global being allowed to continue to operate under minor emission status when it is growing more clear that they and the other tank farms operating in South Portland may very well be major emitters, which would require better monitoring and better capturing of these dangerous VOCs and HAPs. It appears almost a no-brainer that the only way we're going to get accurate measurement of HAPs and VOCs is by direct and more frequent measuring. The citizens living in close proximity to these tanks and these enormous, and their living close to the proximity of the tanks demands no less. That is what a good neighbor would do, and what a corporation that has been given legal status as a person should be called to abide by. So I thank you all for your work, and we're all in this together, and let's hope that we come to a solution that will really answer the question for the people that are being affected. Thank you.
Thank you. And this brings us to the end of the list that I have of people who registered ahead, registered ahead of time to offer comments. Are there others that wish to offer comments that were not on my list? And if anyone else, DEP, sees a raised hand, if you would feel free to point that out, I would appreciate that.
Looks like Melinda Hull has her hand up.
I do.
Proceed if you please. Thank you.
Sure, great. Thank you so much. My name is Melinda Hull, and I live on Kaler Road in South Portland. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, my nearly 4-year-old daughter, Carly, and our dog, Mikey. In 2015, I came back to Maine after nearly 22 years away to contribute my talents and energy to the local economy and to start a family. In all those years away, when people would ask where I am from, I would proudly say, Maine. People were often intrigued. With a full heart and a thoughtful mind, I would explain about our way of life, how we care about each other, how neighbors generally look out for each other, and how we are bound together by our reliance on and appreciation for the land, water, and air that sustains us and so many who visit with us each year, year after year, and time after time. When I first returned and lived on Grand Street, in the morning, sometimes I would notice a smell, sometimes a little sweet, sometimes a little more noxious. I knew what it was. They were doing something with petroleum in the oil tanks. They were the companies who were my neighbors in Ferry Village or over near Pleasantdale. When Carly, who was then 1.5 years old, started attending childcare in spring 2018 in the Lagonia neighborhood, I was pretty excited. We could spend summer afternoons after daycare pickup on the lawn at Four River Brewing. How cool. In the mornings, as we headed to daycare, we'd turn onto Lincoln Street with the windows rolled down, singing songs at the top of our lungs. On many, many days after making that turn, especially in better weather, but really in all weather, my throat would start to burn and Carly would start to cough and have difficulty breathing. Quickly, I would roll up the windows and switch the car air circulator to avoid pulling in any outside air. The fumes from that area would choke us. The air smelled like a mix of petroleum and asphalt. We couldn't sing anymore. And I'd tell Carly to put a scarf or some other piece of clothing item over her nose and mouth to filter out the fumes until we got to daycare. Often at that daycare, Carly and her classmates could not go outside due to those fumes. Hourly, those fumes entered her school's air ventilation system, no matter the weather or the season. The other daycares and schools nearby are all dealing with this exact same issue. If what those kids are breathing is categorized as minor emissions, then I would hate for any of us to breathe anything coming from a major emitter. As a member of your extended community, as your constituent, as your neighbor, I am asking the DEP to re-examine global status as a minor emitter and to require 24/7 independently vetted monitoring and surveillance protocols. As Dr. Scarry just said, we are all in this together, and I'm hoping that we can move forward together for the betterment of all of us in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another raised hand? Is there anyone else who is a part of this Zoom meeting then who would like to speak?
Hello, I don't seem to have the raise your hand function, and I'm wondering if I could have a moment to speak.
You may.
Yes, let me make sure my video is on. Yes, it is. No, I don't know. Something isn't working quite right. Can I be heard?
We can hear you, yes, and we can
Very
see
good.
about from here up.
Let's see. Is
That's
less or
better.
more?
Thank you.
Now, okay, because I don't. It doesn't show me what I look there. Now, can you see my whole face?
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Okay. My comments are very much the same as those of the lady who just spoke, and of Dr. Scarry and of Dr. Taylor. The bottom line here is that month after month drags into year after year, and the problem isn't being solved. And I agree that we should re-examine the status of global as a minor emitter. How can that possibly be, given what was found that started the lawsuit? And the other thing, the monitoring, clearly the emissions go up and down and up and down. There should be as constant as possible monitoring of all the tanks. I don't know, there are all these tricky little tricks that Global has in their application of ways to avoid really getting to brass tacks of letting us see what the emissions really are and of really containing them. My little parrots are getting into the act. They agree. So I think we have no choice but to rely on you of the DEP to help us. Please be our Department of Environment Protection. Please don't let them get away with this stuff. I mean, fortunately, we have some very good townspeople and committees looking into what they're doing and examining all the application with a fine-tooth comb and a microscope, and they're getting onto the tricks. But if I may be so bold, that's your job. Forgive me, but we have no recourse but to depend on you. And that's really what I have to say. And people, you know, it's not smell, it's not carbon. These VOCs, some of them are cancer causing, some of them are neurotoxins, great for a pregnant mother. Oh, perfect. So they really have to be dealt with. It can't go on month after month, year after year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the call, either by phone or by video through Zoom, that would like to speak?
Hello,
Hello.
this is Sue Pastor. I'm here for 350 Main,
Thank
and
you.
I'm glad to be here. Good work happening. I'm not going to say much scientifically. I'm just going to remind the DEP that 350 Main supports you folks, that we're particularly concerned about this classic environmental injustice to people who don't have a voice. I was really impressed by what James Rue had to say. The bigger and the further back these companies, these conglomerates get, the harder it is to touch them. And I don't think that we're talking just about South Portland. We're talking about many places in Maine. That's all I want to say right now, and thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Is there someone else? Last chance. Anyone on? Okay. With that, I believe this concludes this public meeting on the draft air emission license amendment for global companies in South Portland. The comments provided to the department through this meeting are considered part of the public record. Public comments may also be submitted in writing. The deadline for submission of written comments is close of business Friday, October 16, 2020. After the comment period closes, the department will review all comments submitted and provide a formal response to comments document for this licensing action. This document will be posted to the department's website and interested parties notified. Written public comments may be mailed to the address shown on the screen. And for those of you on by phone, that's Maine Department of Environmental Protection, BAQ as in Bureau of Air Quality, Global Project Manager, 17 State House Station, Augusta, Maine, 04333 0017. Or they can be emailed to the email address also shown on the screen, which is air-global.dep@maine.gov. Thank you for your time and thank you for your participation in this public meeting.
Thank you.
And the meeting is hereby closed.